Hello and welcome to AdWords Bootcamp session number 2. And Mike Rhodes has lots of very good key material to get through, and key is the word. Because
Indeed.
we're talking about keywords today. So, Mike, it's yours. Take it away, and glad to have you here.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Good to have you back, wherever you are in the world. A little reminder, first off, this is the link that you need for the Google Plus community. I think most have already dived in there, and sorry for the confusion. I know some of you were sent the wrong link. Everybody's now in the right place, and the questions are already rolling in, which is fantastic. Thank you for that. So today we are going to talk about keywords, and I will preface this by saying that we obviously have a very wide range of experience in the group. Some people are just starting out with the first campaign, others have been running AdWords campaigns for 8 years, so this is a bit more of a refresher if you're at that end of the scale. This is about mastery and laying a really solid foundation. We're going to get into some really funky stuff over the next 6 weeks. There's a little bit of funky stuff in here for you, obviously. I always like to provide a little bit of that, but a lot of this will be a bit of a reminder, maybe some finer distinctions and maybe a few different ways of thinking about things and a few different ways of doing things. But if you've been doing AdWords for many years, then a lot of this you should know.
And
But we'll start with a reminder. Oh, go on. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I'll make the comment just like I did last time. If there are terms and expressions that Mike used where you're like, what does that mean? Like, what is KPI or something like that? Then two answers for you. Number one, both in the Google Plus community and in the AdWords Bootcamp Perry Marshall members area is a glossary PDF that you can download. Incidentally, it's identical to the one in the Ultimate Guide to Google AdWords 4th edition that Mike and I co-authored. So a glossary is there in case you need it. Worst case scenario, if you can't find a definition of the word, then just use your little question box in the GoToWebinar control panel and say, what did that word mean? And I'll make sure you get a definition of it. So that'll keep things flowing smoothly.
One
So
way or another,
Mike,
you will get an answer.
yes.
So yes, we will start with just a gentle reminder. Look, it's not about the tech. We're going to look at a bunch of tools today. We're going to dig into your account. We're going to think big picture, all of that. But ultimately, this is about people, your prospects, looking for an answer to their problem. To do that, we're going to use this thing called empathy. And what Collier probably said this best, we need to enter the conversation already going on in the customer's mind. That was circa 1950 something or other. That is still the situation today. So we'll start big picture, and I promised you mind maps. So there's your mind map. Now that is already in the Google Plus community. The team will download that into the AdWords Bootcamp area on the Perry Marshall side as well as soon as I send it to them, which I haven't done yet. And this is what we're going to work through today. I put that in the Google Plus community last night. Rare for me to finish a mind map early, but just in case you wanted to print that out and then scribble notes on it as we go through. And again, a reminder that we're going to follow with all of this training Tim Ferriss's DIS model, which is deconstruction, selection, sequencing, and stakes. My job is to figure out which are the individual Lego blocks, then what order they go in, which ones do we choose, and all of that, and then encourage you to go use them, because as soon as you go use this, it'll make a lot more sense. So, just a high level bit to start on here. There are lots and lots of different ways of searching, and a couple of different models that we're going to look at here very briefly. Again, I've shared a PDF. I don't believe it's under copyright. If I've got that wrong, I may have to take it down. But Eugene Schwartz, Breakthrough Advertising, I loaded up the PDF into the Google Plus community last night. If you haven't already read that, I really highly, highly recommend it. It is one of the best books on marketing ever written. And there's two models in the book that he uses. And the first is this market sophistication model. Where is your market along this scale? Most markets at this point are in stage 3, And that's why all the stuff that Brian teaches around USP, which Eugene Schwartz called a unique mechanism, what's the thing that's different about the way that you offer your service? Stage one, I think the example in the book is beer. Beer was in stage one in about 1850. It was a brand new market. You didn't have to do very much to sell your product. You just had to make people aware that it existed. When you get to stage two, everybody's laying on the hype. There's loads of advertisements, and everybody's trying to say that they're bigger and better than everybody else. And when we get to stage three, there's less hype now, but now you've got to be a bit cleverer in your market and use differentiation. This was something that Richard Koch talked a lot about at the Chicago webinar, the Chicago event back in September, October last year. Most markets at this point are in stage three, and that's why knowing how you are unique is so important. But for more information on that, go read the PDF. The bit that is most applicable for us today as we talk about the search funnel, we talk about the different ways that people search and therefore the different keywords that they use, is this second model of prospect awareness. So we start at the top, we're completely unaware. We have no idea that we have a problem, never mind that a product exists to solve that problem. Then we move into the problem aware. We know we've got a problem. We're not aware that there's a solution for it. And the key at this point is to show that we feel their pain. So go on.
And Mike, can I throw in the teaser that says one of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things you're going to be showing over the next hour plus is how these 5 different groups of people actually make themselves known via their keyword searches.
Yes, and I'm going to simplify this to give us an easier model to follow.
Very good.
And show where the best place to probably start is, which, funnily enough, is at the bottom of the page, which is why I've flipped this. It usually gets listed 1 through 5. I'm listing it 5 through 1 because it's going to match the image on the next slide a little better.
Well, I like you doing that because this is a really good way of differentiating your prospects. So
it's a great way to think about them and to think about, again, empathy. We've got to understand where they're at before we can show them an ad, before we can figure out which keywords and what a keyword means. I can talk about that in a sec. So very quickly on this, because again, you've got the PDF, I would recommend reading more about this. It'll make you a better marketer. It'll make you a better business person. Solution aware, number 3. So now they know they've got a problem and they know that there is a solution for it. They just don't know that your product provides that solution. So we've got to convince them that your product is the best solution for their problem. Then we move to product aware. So now they know what you sell, but they're not quite sure if it's right for them. So this is the person searching for review terms, and we'll talk about those in a second. They're shopping around now. And lastly, we move to the most aware. They're completely familiar with your product or one very much like it. They know the benefits of it. They know what they want. That's probably where we're going to start. So if I move to the funnel then, so a lot of brand advertising is all about the top of the funnel here. And certainly that's, probably where you're going to make $1 billion if you can move into a whole new market and convince people there's this whole new thing. But that's not us. That's not small business and what AdWords is generally for. It's very, very expensive to educate an entirely new market. Google Display Network can be very good for the top 2 levels on the funnel here and for letting people know that there's this product that they didn't even know about that does a very good job of solving a problem that they may or may not even know that they had. But again, very expensive to do that at the top of the funnel. I said last week that our main job is to maximize profitability. And so I'm going to simplify this 5-step model into a 3-step model, and this is the one that we use in the book. There are people browsing, so lots of informational terms. And again, I'll give you some examples of these in a sec. Then they move to the shopping stage. So this is along the lines of Eugene Schwartz's product aware, solution aware maybe, but more product aware. They start to look for that product now. And then once they've figured that bit out, then they move into buying phase. Now they've got the credit card out and they're ready to buy. I'm going to suggest that most of what we do starts at least on the bottom two of these, and probably starting right at the bottom. There's less people right at the bottom, but they're the ones most likely to be profitable. So that's our archery target, that's our bullseye. Let's spend money there first, even if it is low volume. Let's get that really profitable, and then grudgingly move out on the archery target. Remember, to our next concentric circle. All of those people shopping, comparing products. Let's get in front of those. Let's ignore the browsers for now. Those very informational terms. Lots of how do I or how to terms. Very difficult to make money from those. We're not going to go there yet. So I'm going to break this down into 4 distinctions so that we can, again, sort of cover the vocabulary first, and then we can talk in more detail. I talked right at the beginning of last week about the different types of search campaign, the different types of display campaign. And I'll use these terms a lot. Brand keywords versus non-brand keywords. Little example. So if I'm doing AdWords for my business, the brand is either my name or the name of my business. Non-brand terms, the products and services that we sell. So that should be, I would think, for everybody on this call, immediately obvious. We've covered this one. We're going to start at the bottom of the funnel and work our way grudgingly up, a layer at the time, stopping if it becomes unprofitable. So an example of those buying terms, I'll start on the right-hand side of the screen here. Buy, order, best price. People, again, think of them, picture them with credit card in hand, and intent is a word that we'll use a lot today. What's the intent behind the keyword? Versus shopping, they're looking to review, they're looking for a bit more information, they're comparing terms. They may be comparing you with other brands still at this point, but they're getting closer. You may want to show for those keywords, but you can see already they are very, very different. They're going to bring in different people. We're going to ignore the browse terms for now for your first campaign. Too expensive. I'm sure you've heard the phrase long tail. I get a lot of questions around this. What does that actually mean? Is it just the number of words in the keyword? Well, that's a good approximation. That's a pretty good way to think of it. And when we get to Module 6, Google Analytics, I'll show you a new feature that they've just rolled out in Analytics where you can actually do this kind of analysis now on all of your AdWords in the Google Analytics account. They actually tell you some really good information around this. We'll get to that in week 6. Short head, shorter phrases that have vastly more volume. Many, many more people are searching for those, basically because we're lazy. Now that is changing because we're starting to speak to our phones and computers a bit more. We haven't hit tipping point there yet, but that is not far away, where we are asking of our devices natural language questions and expecting them to understand and give us an answer. So the long tail is definitely not dead. You will probably have a mix of both in your account. I'm going to talk about what we're going to do in terms of building this in a sec. I'm just distinctions for now, just giving some examples so we understand the vocabulary. And lastly, modifiers. So think of keywords in these 2 parts. You've got a root keyword, probably a short head term related to the thing that you sell. A modifier is the additional part of that word. So fast laptop, cheap laptop, skinny jeans, blue jeans, Chicago plumber, emergency plumber. Hopefully you get the idea. So modifiers are very useful. It helps us narrow things down, but we just need to understand that those are interchangeable, that we can have lots of different modifiers. And the root part of the keyword here is what we're going to use when we start playing with some tools in a second.
I wonder how many people search for skinny blue Chicago plumber in a probably not many.
On a Friday night, more. So what's a good keyword? I get asked this question all the time, and it depends on your goal. We'll talk about how we use keywords from a targeting point of view for display campaigns in week 7. For now, I'm again going to assume that our goal is profit, that it's not educating a wider market, that it's not telling people about a product that had no idea that existed yet. we're going to start with some non-brand terms, because brand is a given. I believe you should have a brand campaign. If you need an argument for that, if you're doing this for a client, the guys put a blog post up at websavvy.com.au a few weeks ago, 7 reasons why having a brand campaign is essential. Remind me in the Google Plus community if you want that, and I'll share the link there, or you can just go search for it. I think it's essential. Every single one of our accounts, we will have a brand campaign, because you've done all of this work to cause people to know about you. It would be insane if they go looking for you and can't find you. Even if you have that #1 ranking organically, why take the risk that those people might click on someone else? And if you don't show an ad for your own brand, Google is most likely going to show 3 ads for competitors that are going to bid on your brand. It's going to show 3 ads above your organic listing. You do not want those people stealing your traffic. But brands are given. I'm not going to spend any time there because that's dead easy to do. We're going to focus on non-brand, bottom of the funnel, i.e. buying and shopping terms. And the other question I get asked all the time is, how many keywords should I have? And there is no magic answer to this. It is essentially how many are manageable and relevant for you. So how many do you think you can manage? Glenn Livingston, we talked about last week, who came up with this concept of the bullseye keyword. He talks about having 1 absolute dead center bullseye keyword and 5 other keywords around it, i.e. starting your AdWords account with 6 keywords. Now I think that's a tad low, but if it's your first ever AdWords account, and if you're in a market that's got any kind of competition in, then it is smart to start with a very low number and to put all of your time and effort into getting those profitable, into making sure you totally understand that market and have the best ad copy that you can possibly get. I'm going to give you a range because everybody wants a number. Now, we will obviously start accounts with generally hundreds and probably thousands of keywords, but I've got a very smart team who've been doing this a long time. So the manageable bit for us, we can manage tens of thousands of keywords. We've got the tools and the experience to do that. If it's your first AdWords campaign, I would suggest somewhere in this range is probably a good place to start, because you're going to be trawling through some tools in a minute and going and reading through keyword lists and either jotting ideas down on a pad of paper with a pen, or probably throwing these into some sort of spreadsheet. It's the 80-20 rule. You don't want to spend 2 months doing keyword research so you've got this perfect list of 3,500 keywords, only to turn the account on and find that actually a lot of those assumptions were wrong. So it's the fail fast methodology, the whole lean methodology that's so popular at the moment. We want to just get something up. We want it to be a pretty decent approximation. As someone said to me on a call yesterday, it's a swag. It's a sophisticated wild-ass guess. That's good enough as a starting point. And that's a really key thing, because I think a lot of beginner AdWords practitioners get quite hung up on this. Whatever keywords you pick, it is just a starting point. The key to profitability is how you manage them on an ongoing basis. It's being able to look at the data and kill the ones that are costing you too much money, and to discover A, the ones that are making money, but also B, new ones that you hadn't thought of. I'll tell you exactly how to do that in a second. And pushing more and more of your budget into those areas that make you money, and being able to identify those areas that are costing you money, reducing that or killing that altogether, and pushing the budget over onto the other side, the stuff that makes money. So it's just a starting point. Good enough is good enough. Remember the 80-20 rule. And that's why I'm going to say, like, if you're starting out, 250 is probably a good place to stop. So aim for a couple of hundred. All right, so tools. Get asked a lot about tools. I'm going to give you a few others in a minute. But the Google Keyword Planner, it's now called. It's not the Google Keyword Tool. And you have to be logged into a Google AdWords account in order to use this. Let me just turn my mic down here a little so that there's hopefully a little less background noise. Yeah, Google Keyword Tool is gone. Google Traffic Estimator is gone. Both of those have been replaced with the Google Keyword Planner. You'll find it by logging into your AdWords account, going to Tools, and then finding it on the list under there, Google Keyword Planner. It is good enough for 90, maybe even 95% of what you're going to need, at least when you're starting out. When you're doing this for clients, then that's probably the time to start buying at least one of the many, many, many paid tools. We often start with Google Planner. We've been doing this a long time. They have the best data. Everybody else is sampling and guessing at data. It's not super, super accurate data, but it's pretty good. And rather than bore you to tears, because again, wide range of expertise and experience rather on the call. Some of you have played with Google Planner a lot. So we created this video for Planet Perry members 2, 3, 4 months ago. So it's very current, very up to date. It's a half-hour video that walks you through every aspect of the planner. So rather than bore you to tears, if that's not your thing today, this is an optional extra. If you've been doing AdWords less than a year, you definitely want to go through here. Again, I will post all of these links in one post in the Google Plus community at the end of this call, just to make everything easy to find. But if you want to jot that down now, knock yourself out. And obviously, again, you will get a copy of all of these slides with the links in. So this is what the Keyword Planner looks like. Over on the left-hand side, first box, targeting. Should have numbered these, I didn't. Over here, you can set some criteria for what you want Google to look for. Probably the main one you're going to use in there is that first one of the location. So you can click on the little pencil icon and set that to just the US or just Australia, just Italy. G'day, Francesco. Whatever it is that you want to do, so that you get more accurate data for your country. When you're in brainstorming mode at the beginning, I would leave that on all locations so that you get a much larger data set, you get many more ideas. Because this is not about, oh, that's a great keyword that nobody else has ever thought of, I'll use that. Use this as an idea generator more than anything else. Up in the top box, you see where it says your product or service. Again, in the video, I cover a few different ways that you can kick this off and where do you start. But for the most part, if you just chuck in a root keyword in there, again, you know, that short head, probably 1 or 2 word phrase that describes at least, you know, your main product or service. So I've commented something random here, parrot, and then hit the big Get Ideas button. Now there's 2 tabs. I've highlighted one, Add Group Ideas. Hang on one second. Keep the noise down, please. What's up? Add Group Ideas is the default tab that you're going to land on. So Google is actually going to group your keywords for you. We're going to talk about how to group keywords a little later on. I haven't actually talked about what the agenda is for today, have I? After we get through the tools bit, we'll talk about match types, we're going to talk about negative keywords, and then we'll talk about how to group keywords. For now, you probably want to flip straight to the Keyword Ideas tab and maybe start to get a little more specific in the keyword that you type in at the top. So I'll go back a slide. Down here, the groups that it gave me, parrot pictures. Well, I definitely know I don't want any parrot picture keywords because that's going to be very much an informational browsing type keyword. There's not much money, there's not much commercial intent behind someone searching for a keyword like parrot pictures. So commercial intent is a really good thing to have in your mind. And you can see that a little bit if you look at the 4th, 5th column along there, competition. Google says, okay, there's low competition for these keywords. That would suggest in 2015 that people have found it difficult to monetize these keywords. If it's high or probably medium competition, then it's more likely that this is the market where there is money. Buy parrots, bottom of the funnel terms here. They would be a good bunch of keywords to go after, assuming we sell parrots. Competition high, lots of other people going after that. Makes sense. Parrot information, parrot facts, no, not interested in those. Again, top of the funnel, browsing style keywords. Pet parrot, that's the one I'm going to use as the example as we walk through here. Parrot cage, so again, think about the products that you sell. I'll talk about negative keywords in a second, but you're using this to generate ideas to say, okay, people in this universe of people interested in parrots, they search for all of this sort of stuff. What I would suggest is you whether you do this in Excel or a piece of paper, put a line down the middle of the piece of paper, and on one side write good, and on the other side write bad. We'll talk about negative keywords in a bit. They're essentially the bad keywords. We're going to just jot down big ideas there of stuff that we don't want to show ads for. And I'll explain what I mean by that when we get to negative keywords and give you a couple of distinctions around that. But if you didn't sell parrot cages, you would jot cage down in the bad column. Parrot car, I'll get to a little later. So we pick, again, still keeping it fairly short head terms. If you put in a long tail term at the top here, if you put in a 5 or 6 word phrase here, then the amount of data that you're going to get back is next to nothing. So you want to keep a fairly short term at the top of the page. And now I'm going to move across to the keyword ideas tab, because I'm going to say to Google, no, I'm not interested in how you would group things right now. I want to see some individual data for these individual keywords. And you can see that it tells you roughly, and these numbers are roughly how many people search each month in whatever targeting I've set up top left. So if I've changed the country, these numbers change. And suggested bid, you don't even need to write those down for now. You just eyeball those. Just have a rough idea of, okay, pet parrot market, that looks to be around about the sort of $1 to $2 market. That will be a guide in week 4 when we go and start setting our campaigns up. And I'll just give you a couple of little, again, this is all covered in the video, 30 minutes there. I'll walk through this in great detail, but I will just call out a couple of extra little bits here. In the options over on the left-hand side, you can go in there, click on the little pencil icon. This top one can be quite useful. So instead of seeing, let's go back to here, you'll notice about halfway down that list of keywords, we've got birds for sale. Now, birds for sale isn't, yes, a parrot is a bird, but birds for sale, think of it this way, let's back up for a second. It's about majorities. The majority of people searching for a term like birds for sale are not looking for parrots. So sort of picture this person typing in birds for sale. They don't yet know what type of bird they want. This is definitely top of the funnel stuff. Yes, some of those people might want a parrot. Yes, a group of those people might be persuaded that they need a parrot, but far, far more profitable to wait until they figure that out for themselves on some other site and wait until they come back and search for parrots for sale and then get in front of them than to get in front of them at this stage and say, yep, you're looking for a bird, I've got a parrot, parrot's an awesome bird, great pet, does blah, 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 blah. It talks. What could be better than that? Wait for them to figure out that they want a parrot and wait till they come back in those shopping and buying sections of the funnel. Your account will suddenly be a lot more profitable. So this keyword option over here says only show ideas closely related to my search term, the search term being what we entered in that box right at the top of the page. So by ticking that option, which I've highlighted on the left here, now you can see that all of those keyword ideas are much more relevant and they're all about parrots and pet parrots in this case. So that can be a useful little option to turn on. That's all we're going to spend on the keyword tool. Remember the DIS formula. The fourth S was stakes. The only way you learn is by going and playing and doing this. So whether that's as soon as we get off this call, which is pretty late if you're in Europe, tomorrow, over the course of the next week, do play with this. Do start to put some keyword ideas into a spreadsheet, because I'll show you in week 4 then how we can start to build everything that we need to build to either create a new campaign, if you've been doing this for a while and you want to do a rebuild, or setting up for the first time. Google Keyword Tool is obviously not the only one out there. Google Keyword Planner, sorry, the name has changed. Other tools to brainstorm keywords. Again, you're not looking for individual terms that you can cut, paste, and stick straight into your account. Treat this as idea generation, and to think about a group of ideas that you can then turn into keywords. So you can ideas that you can plug into the keyword tool and turn into keywords that way. And the best place to start is your website. Have a look, assuming you've got one already, have a look at your website, particularly the navigation section of your website. This is a very well-known company here in Australia. They started selling health insurance, they now sell all other types. So it would make sense for them to have categories or campaigns inside their account covering all of these major different things that they sell. Your website is probably organized into the different areas of the products and services that you sell. If you sell swimwear, you might have men's, ladies, and kids. If you sell insurance, it might look a bit more like this. Whatever that is for you. So start with your own website, because this is where you're going to send all the traffic to anyway. It doesn't make sense to advertise something that doesn't exist on your website. You would have nowhere to send that traffic. That's pretty obvious. If you don't think your website is up to scratch, then go look at competitor sites. Talk to people, be that your staff, customers, prospects, family members. You know what I do for a living. What would you do if you were searching for the stuff that I sell? And you probably only need to have half a dozen of those conversations to get a very clear idea of the way people search, because often we can be too close to our own businesses to really think objectively about that.
By the way, don't drop that comment that you just made, Mike, at the end of your sentence, because it's actually very, 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 very true and very, very important. We are all so close to our own businesses, we don't know what our prospects out there are actually thinking when they come looking for us, unless you've been in this business and just know it like the back of your hand for years and years and years.
Yeah, it's the paradox of knowledge. We tend to use jargony terms because we've forgotten that they're actually jargon, because we use them day in, day out. We tend not to think like that person that knows nothing about our market, and that's why empathy is such a key trait to have when you're doing this. But yeah, thank you for making me realize that that's important. Google Analytics is a less useful place than it used to be for finding keyword ideas. Google, in their infinite wisdom, supposedly for privacy reasons, hide most of the keyword data that used to be found in Google Analytics. However, if you have a search function on your site, which most e-commerce sites do, it's not as needed for a lead gen site, but if you have that search function, you can use Google to do that very, very well for free. They have a free version of this, and then as you can see there, they start at $100 for a more advanced version. So you can use the power of Google search, which we all know is the best search, to add search to your site. If you have that, then the terms that people are searching for on your site gives you some great keyword ideas to go look for. So if you already have that on your site, fantastic. Dig into analytics, assuming that it was set up the right way. You can dig into analytics and get a list of all of the things that people have been searching for on your site. We were able to, actually, just as a random side story, we were able to look at that data recently for a client, and it was really obvious when we looked at the data that the searches where people weren't finding an answer, and just by looking at that data, tweaking just a couple of little things on their site so that when people searched for the terms that most people were searching for, that they were actually able to find products, because there's nothing more frustrating than you search for something and it comes back with there were 0 results for that search because you've got one letter out of place or something ridiculous like that. And just a little tweak there can massively improve the results that your site gets. But anyway, search is good. And the search query report. Now I'm going to talk about search queries in just a second. If you have, again, this is a bit more upwards 201, but if you have a dynamic search ad campaign, DSA campaign, or a Google Shopping campaign, again, we're going to talk more about those in week 5, so don't worry if you don't have one of those yet, then you can dig in behind those campaigns and look at the search query, i.e. the thing that people were typing into Google that triggered your ad to show. So if you already have those running, those are great places to go looking for data. We're going to talk about this a lot when we talk more about reporting, but just quickly, because if you do have data already, which I know a large portion of people on the call do, the easiest, the cleanest place to find this data is to go to the Dimensions tab inside the interface. And you can do this for everything, for the whole account, all online campaigns. You can do it at the campaign level or in that tree view over on the left-hand side, which isn't shown here. You can click on just an individual ad group if you want, and see all of the search terms that caused your ads to show for the keywords in that particular ad group. Again, we'll talk about search terms in just a sec, just to give you that finer distinction. But that's a great place to go look for. Obviously, I've blurred the search terms out here for privacy reasons for my client, but looking through that list and looking for phrases there that you don't already have as keywords, particularly if they are converting and turning into customers, particularly if they're doing so very cheaply as they are for the top two terms here, then you want to make sure that obviously those are keywords in the account. More idea generation, Google Instant. Go to Google itself, start typing in the search box, and Google will pop up a whole bunch of related terms. If you go to YouTube, you get an even longer list. But that's a lot of work, going there and typing this in. And I remember back in the day an SEO conference, and they were talking about literally you would type parrot space A and look at all the things that popped up, and then you delete the A and put B and look at all the things that popped up. That's too much work for me. It was too much work for the guys that invented this tool too. So ubersuggest.org, you go to this tool, you chuck in pet parrot at the top, and it gives you lists of all of these by letter, all of the A terms, all of the B terms. So pet parrot breeds, pet parrot by, pet parrot best breeds, blue parrot, all of these terms. Again, do not copy and paste this list into your account and start running ads, but use this as an idea generator of, hey, that could be a good idea, and if that's a good idea, what are other related ideas to that? Oh, there's something I definitely don't want to have. I've just seen pet parrot British accent. That's just confused me. Okay.
Or pet parrot cusses like a sailor.
I didn't make these up. I just cut and paste these. That's fantastic. People are searching for this stuff. If you don't sell a pet parrot that cusses like a sailor, then maybe you want cusses as a negative keyword, and we'll talk about exactly how to do that in a minute. I like this tool.
That's actually very
similar.
true.
Yeah, very similar to this tool, keywordtool.io. Again, I will put all of these links for you. I will make a note to myself to put all of these links in the Google Plus community. Very, very similar tool. This one has a couple of benefits in that it gives you two lists for each letter, so you can just about see sort of middle right and bottom left of your screen, pet parrot A and A pet parrot. So all of the phrases where pet parrot had, yeah, you get the idea. They've got words starting with A after or words starting with A before. This one also has, if you look right at the top of the screen, it's got Google and YouTube and Bing and even App Store up there, and you can choose which version of Google. So you're probably going to start with google.com, but if you want to go specific for your country, you might use, say, google.co.uk and look at the results there. That can be useful where you've got keywords that often have a geographical element, Chicago, plumber, London, lawyer, etc. Setting this to your country will give you probably a more relevant list to go use.
And Mike, what is the URL for this tool again?
This one is keywordtool.io.
Okay, and some folks are asking, like, why would, what does this have that Keyword Planner doesn't? And it sounds like that it does those very specific permutations like this in a exhaustive fashion in a way that Keywords Planner tool does not, right?
Yeah, and just a different way to view them. So I would use both, but some things are going to jump out at you from this list of just looking through these 26 boxes, one for each letter, and the fact that you can then go, well, okay, what are people searching for on YouTube? Maybe there's some different ideas there. And when we talk about YouTube in week 7, then we'll come back to this tool then and look at the results that are under that tab. Then it's going to be similar data. Obviously, there's not as much data here. So again, it's more just about ideas. I actually find this more useful for negative keywords than I do for coming up with ideas for the main keywords that are going to live in my account. Just to see all of the random stuff that people are searching for, you can build a much, much bigger and better negative keyword list by looking at this, whereas in the keyword planner, all of that stuff tends to fall to the bottom of a big long list. So keyword, use both. They're slightly different, and they're going to give you some different ideas. But that's the point here. It's just about the idea generation. It's not about doing all of your work for you so that you can cut and paste and plug these into a spreadsheet, and off we go. There are many, many paid tools, partly because I know Mike and he built this tool. We use SpyFu, but I've just found it to be one of the better paid tools in the market. We have used pretty much all of them out there. This is the one that we keep coming back to. I'm not going to do a big exhaustive how to use SpyFu because 80% of us on the call will probably never use it. If you've got more than a dozen clients and you're doing this as an agency, then you probably want to get into at least one paid tool. For what this does, it's pretty darn cheap. There are some great training videos available on YouTube, so you can go watch those first and decide if it looks like a tool for you. I believe they have I think it's a free 14-day trial. So everybody could go and play with this for 14 days. It's not as intuitive as the other tools, but you can see on the left-hand side, it's got some funky ways there that I can filter and sort my results. It's also got ways of looking at, well, it tries to guess. It's not totally accurate. I shouldn't give you that impression, but it shows you some ideas of what it believes keywords are that other competitors might be bidding on. And if you're just starting out and if you're completely confused, then what a great place to start by looking at the keywords that your competitors are using today, because presumably they've been testing for 5 years and they've already added a whole bunch of negative keywords. They've decided which keywords they don't want to show for anymore. And so starting essentially with someone's test diary in front of you is a great place to start. It also shows you all of their ads and shows you over time how their ads have changed. So again, it is sort of like looking at someone's test diary and saying, oh, look, 2 years ago they were saying this sort of stuff in their ad. A year ago they were saying this. Today they're saying this. Let's just model what they're saying today. That's probably a fairly good place to start. And obviously, I am not saying you would cut and paste that ad and put an exact copy of that in your account. Again, a little bit of thinking work needs to be done, but what a fantastic resource to be able to see how somebody's ads have changed over time and maybe what some of those key benefits that they're mentioning in the ad and how that's changed. It's a great tool. So both from a keyword point of view and from an ad writing point of view. And I'll show you some of the ad data next week when we talk about ads. I really like this tool. I find it much more useful than many other paid tools.
At WebSavvy, you use this for your clients. Sounds like it works in Australia. Is that correct? Ian is asking.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of these tools don't have stacks of accurate Australian data. We're going to talk about AdBeat, Mike Kalaya's tool for image ads when we get to week 7. That has good Australian data. This, for the search keywords, only has US and UK data, but again, it's a fantastic idea generator, and you're not going to see competitors in Australia here unless they're advertising in the US. But I will look at a big market in the US, i.e. something that's going to be competitive, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, because I figure that the advertisers in those markets that rise to the top have to be pretty smart to survive in those markets. There's a lot of competition. So I look at what they're doing and look for ideas that I can then pick up and apply. And I think Australia, the UK, I'm English in case you hadn't realized, originally I'm a reformed POM. We tend to behave in pretty similar ways, so I'll often use London data as well to get maybe just some little nuances there and look at what people in London are doing. Again, picking a competitive market, not someone that's advertising in Cornwall where there's probably less people advertising.
And if if you're doing keyword searches for other languages such as Spanish, French, Italian, German, non-European languages.
I funnily enough don't do a whole lot of that, but Google Keyword Tool is going to be your best bet. I don't know if there are tools specific to those languages. That might be a opportunity. Probably the best paid tool is our good friend Rich Stokes. He has a tool called Guru, which may need to be spelled out in the chat box, but Adgooroo, but that is significantly more expensive than SpyFu. So that probably applies to 1% of people on the call, whereas SpyFu is probably something that could be used by 20% of people on the call. For most of us, the Google Keyword Planner is sufficient. And I do want to make that point that you don't need to dive in and pay for these tools. Start with a Google Keyword tool. Good enough is good enough. 80-20 rule. Start there. And the last one I've got for you, this is a slightly off-the-wall idea, but Amazon can be a great place. Again, not for specific keywords, but for idea generation. So you'd go to Amazon. Let's keep on the parrot theme. I search the book department for parrot books. I find something that's reasonably popular, and I was able to find a Parrots for Dummies book. And inside there, they've got not only a contents at a glance, a nice high level, which gives me some great ideas, but it's got this full table of contents there where it lists out all of the things in all of these chapters. I've just shown you one little example there. Just taking 5 minutes to read through the table of contents of just one, maybe two books will give you a whole stack of ideas for things that you didn't even realize existed in this market. One that's just popped out to me on the screen there is Chapter 7, Parrot-Proofing Your Home. I wouldn't have had a clue. I've got a toddler. I know how to toddler-proof a home. I would have no idea that people were searching for that sort of thing. And if, again, it's not a product and service that you sell, then your negative keyword alarm is going off loudly at this point. But what a great idea start, because the person that got paid to write this book got paid a fair bit of money. And by the way, we'll talk about this next week as well, but I'll mention it while we're here. You know how you can, the whole guide, and you can see the book on Amazon, and you can flip it over and look at the back cover. The person that get paid to write the bullets on the back cover gets paid an awful lot of money. And that is fantastic fodder for ad copy, because they've figured out what is this market really, what pushes their buttons, what are the things they really want to know about. We've got 3 seconds to sell this person on paying $20 for this book. That is great information to test in your ads. And again, it's just a starting point. Whatever you end up using on day one of your AdWords account doesn't bear any resemblance to what you'll have in that account 6 months or a year down the track. Some of those keywords will still be there, many will be gone, and many new ones will be added. It's just a starting point, so don't worry about perfection. Perfection is a myth. Now,
well, and Perry's been saying for 10 plus years, go to your local library, pull out a book on your topic, and go through the table of the contents in the front of the book, and then go through the index in the back of the book.
Yep.
And you're going to learn something about the vocabulary that your customers use.
And you don't even have to leave your armchair these days. You go to magazines.com and look at all the magazines in your market, and Google Books and read all those books, and Amazon and look at all of that. It's enter the conversation already going on in your customer's mind. Mr. Collier said it best. Right. Any questions that need to be tidied up before we move into match types?
No, we were able to answer them in real time, so you're good.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. So this is one of the key distinctions. I took it out of the distinctions section at the top because I wanted to actually give it a bit more room to breathe, and we have already touched on this, but this is something that confuses a lot of people, not just early on in the AdWords career, but I see people that have been running accounts for 2-3 years that haven't yet made this distinction. And it's a subtle one, but it's the difference between a search query and a keyword. The search query, also called the search term, is what the punter has typed into Google. The keyword is the bit that you control. This is the thing that lives in your account. So an example might look like this. If you had the keyword plumber in your account, your ad might show to all of those people over on the right-hand side that are searching for all of these very different search queries. The terminology that Google uses, do they match? If the search query is a close enough match to the keyword, then the ad is shown. There's a bunch more complicated stuff that we'll worry about later. But it's this matching thing that often confuses people. And that's where the term match types come from. So a bit of a complicated slide. This one's been around forever. It's one of Google's, so I'm going to stick with it rather than build my own and complicate things. Start down in the bottom right corner with the black box where it says exact formal shoes. And yes, I know about close variants. You smart AdWords 301 people, they're yelling at the screen right now. I'll talk about that in a sec. For the most part, generally speaking, if the search query, this is the bit where it says matches, if the search query is formal shoes, so, no, sorry, let me do that the other way around. If the keyword is the exact keyword, so we have different types of keyword, exact, phrase, modified broad, and broad. If your keyword is the exact match, and the way we denote exact match is to use these square brackets. I can't even talk about this without making square bracket shapes with my hands because I've been talking about this for 10 years. It's just habit. So if the keyword is the exact match keyword, formal shoes, we denote that with the square brackets, then that is only going to match, generally speaking, the search query formal shoes. Those two words in that order with no other words as part of that search query. So it's the safest type of keyword to use. You know exactly which queries you're going to match to, but you miss a lot. Think back to the screens we've been looking at with all of these hundreds and hundreds of different keywords on. People are weird. That's sort of the underlying story here. People are weird and they use a vast range of search queries to find the things that you sell. We use language differently. We think about things differently. The intent behind what we're trying to do is different, but we're just weird. And to get the exact same thing, we all use slightly different words and phrases to get there. So if you only use exact match keywords, you're going to miss out on a huge chunk of the market. It's much safer, but you're going to miss out on a lot of volume. And so we come up to the blue box then, which is the phrase match keyword, and we denote that by the double quotes around the keyword. So the phrase match keyword, formal shoes, matches various search queries. In this case, black formal shoes for men. The phrase formal shoes must be present in those search queries, i.e. those words in that order with no other words in between. So with other words before and or after. So black formal shoes for men. Where can I buy formal shoes? But not formal black shoes, because the phrase formal shoes is not in the query formal black shoes. Those two words have got another word in between, therefore the phrase is not there. Now come out to the big green box, so top left on your screen. Ignore the modified broad for a second. And this has been in Google for as long as I remember. We've had these three types, broad, phrase, and exact. If you had the broad keyword, which is what almost everybody has when they start out, because this is what Google defaults to until you're smart enough to know about phrase and exact. If you have the broad match keyword, formal shoes, then you're going to match a whole stack of queries that you may be not expecting. So you can see from the example here, the word shoes doesn't even appear in formal footwear. The word formal or the word shoes don't appear in evening footwear. Google is saying, yeah, it's kind of close. It's broadly matching the keyword that you had. The problem with this is that you're going to end up showing ads to such a wide range of people, many of those people looking for something completely different from what you sell, that it is much harder, therefore, to get this profitable and to run a good account, because a good account is all about showing the right ad to the right person. And if this person is searching for men's dress wingtips, they probably want to see an ad about men's dress wingtips. I mean, that's going to be the most relevant ad to show them, and you're probably going to send that person to a slightly different page on your website. But if your ad talks about formal shoes, it's a bit blah. It's a bit, yeah, whatever. the guy that is right next to you talking about men's dress wingtips is going to stand out much more. It's going to be much more relevant to the person searching, and they're going to get the click. So that's why I'm going to suggest that you don't use broad match keywords, at least until you've been playing with AdWords for a fair while. So 4, maybe 5 years ago, Google invented this thing called modified broad match, because broad had become too broad. Broad had started matching really irrelevant stuff, and we as advertisers were all jumping up and down. You had to do so much more work to not waste money in your accounts. So they created this thing called modified broad. So the dark green square next to the blue square, let's start there. Plus formal plus shoes says to Google, here's the keyword, it's a modified broad match now, and these two words, formal and shoes, because I've got a plus sign directly in front of them, no space in between the plus sign and the word, this says to Google, those two words, formal and shoes, must appear somewhere in the search query. I don't care where they are. They can have other words in between now. You can have misspellings of those words, but they've got to be in there somewhere, e.g. formal evening shoes, because that doesn't match the phrase formal shoes, remember. That gave us much more control, but also at the same time shows our ads to still quite a wide audience. So as you get better with AdWords, as you get a deeper understanding of what you're trying to achieve, then modified broad can be very, very useful. I'll talk about this on the next slide, but to discover new ideas, to discover new search queries. The keyword is known, the keyword you control, plus formal plus shoes. You might use something like that to go, okay, Google, you show this ad to all of these people searching for these weird and random phrases, as long as they have those two words in it, show those ads and then give me the data. And then I'll decide, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about ongoing management, I'll decide which one of those I want to keep, which one of those I want to get rid of.
Some comments about this.
I'm sure. Yes, they usually are.
Yep, this is where the question box comes alive. First off, the order of the words in your keyword in your Google account matters only for exact and phrase match. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Plus shoes space plus formal is exactly the same as plus formal plus shoes.
Right. So that answers Arnie's question. And a couple of folks are asking, does modified broad would pick up singulars and plurals? Is that right?
Yes. Yes. They all do these days.
Right. Unless like you have some setting that ensures that exact match is strictly and exclusively exact match.
That's gone away.
That's good. That's gone away. Well, great.
That's gone away. Yeah. Even exact. So what we're talking about is this thing called close variance, which is probably a little bit more of an AdWords 201 thing, but let's cover that. It used to be that you could say to Google, I want to be really, really precise here. And if I say exact match formal shoes, then I only mean formal shoes, because someone searching for formal shoe is probably slightly different. Glenn Livingston, again, showed some research that he had done on this. This is going back a few years when he was selling ebooks. Guinea pig and guinea pigs. And I forget which one was the winner, but one of those was 3 times more profitable than the other. And so obviously we want to treat those two terms differently in our account. Well, the ability to do that went away at the end of last year. Exact match no longer means really precisely exact match. Google went, well, I'm still going to take the reins a little bit, and I'm going to decide what is close to exact match. So that's common misspellings, singulars and plurals. There are some advanced ways around that. We don't need to worry about that yet. But for the most part, that's why I keep saying for the most part, generally speaking, exact match means roughly exact match. I'm going to suggest to you, if this is your first ever AdWords account, that you probably start with well, depends on your appetite for risk. If you're really conservative, start with only exact match keywords. Mm-hmm. The volume will be much lower, but
Right.
you'll have much greater control and you won't need to worry too much about negative keywords that we're going to talk about in a second. For the most part, most people can get away with phrase match terms. It's going to depend on your market a little bit. If you're in a $80 a click market, you're probably going to want to start a little bit more conservatively with the exact match terms. But for most markets, most people can start with phrase match. It gives you a greater level of control. You don't need to worry as much about negative keywords, although you now start to need some. But it's a good trade-off. It's a good place to learn and still get a decent volume of traffic. Because remember, the boxes, the size of the box here gives you an indication. It's not meant to be an exact science, and it says at the bottom, not drawn to scale, but there are more search queries that match the phrase formal shoes, obviously, than match the exact keyword formal shoes. So as you change the match type, so does the universe of search queries grow. If you use modified broad, that can be very useful, but you probably don't want to use it for your first ever campaign, because Google is going to show your ads to a whole bunch of people that you had no idea were out there, a whole bunch of weird and wacky search queries, and you just don't need that hassle when you're starting out with your first campaign. Far better these days to start small, nail that, and then expand out. So I'll talk about this concept and then we'll clear up the rest of the questions. But we use a structure in our accounts in the agency of, we talk about winners versus discovery campaigns. So a discovery campaign, let's say when you're just starting out, it might be only phrase match keywords. If you're a bit more advanced, it might be all modified broad match keywords. Again, we rarely use broad match keywords these days, just not worth the hassle for the most part. There are certain reasons, we don't need to worry about those right now. So phrase or mod broad, depending on where you're at. Then we look at the data. So again, keywords are just a starting point. Then we look at the data. Again, dimensions tab, search query report is one way to do that. There are many, but that's the easiest. We look through that search query report and we go, aha, here's a search query that's working really well, i.e. it's getting conversions for us at a sensible price that's profitable. What we then do is we pick up that exact search query, and this is Perry's phrase that he invented of peel and stick. We then peel that search query. We turn it into an exact match keyword now, and we stick it in its own group over in a winners campaign, and we probably crank the bid up a little bit. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's good enough for now. What that enables me to do is to say, yep, here's something that's working really well. I'm going to stick it out here on its own where I can give it a bit more love and care and attention and a bit more money, and I can make sure I show up when anybody searches for that. Google, show my ad every single time. Meanwhile, I can keep my discovery campaign churning away, maybe on a slightly lower budget so I don't break the bank, and I can keep fishing for new search queries. I can keep looking for new ideas, and when I find a winner, I stick it over in the winners campaign. And again, I'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about building out campaigns in week 4. But that's the general structure that we use. It's also called an alpha-beta structure. If you do a quick search on Google, you'll find a bunch of blog posts that explain that in more detail if you can't wait for week 4. Any other questions on that before I move on?
Yeah, we have a few. Let's see. So Robert asks, if you're thinking about an 80-20 approach to keyword research, do you need to waste time building lists of thousands of keywords when you can just use modified broad with an extensive negative keyword list?
Well, you still need to do the thinking to build the negative keywords. So you definitely don't need thousands. Again, I would suggest starting in the low hundreds, but you still need to do that thinking. Using those other tools like keywordtool.io are really good idea generators for what would a good negative keyword be for me. And if the phrase negative keyword still scares you, don't worry, that's coming in a sec. But yes, you certainly don't need thousands and thousands. Modified broad has been a wonderful addition to the arsenal. It is now much easier to keep things on track without, as you say, Robert, doing extensive keyword research and worrying about every little nuance in that market. But you still need to be careful there, because you will still match to a whole bunch of weird and wacky search queries.
Okay. Going back, if you don't mind, going back to actually a previous topic about
Of course.
browse, shop, and buy keywords. Jordan says, what if and I'm going to try to answer this question first, and then you can take a crack at it. What if I sell information and people are not necessarily searching to buy or purchase, they're looking for how to, etc. And Jordan, my answer to that, and then Mike can give his, is the principle behind the whole thing is you want to find out, make an educated guess as to what kinds of search queries people are typing in that represent people who are ready to pay for information and ready to buy, hot and bothered, credit card in hand. And so they may not necessarily type in buy information or best price on such and such kind of information, but you will find over time in your market that there are terms people use who are better educated and more ready to purchase versus other kinds of search queries that people type in who are not quite as ready. Mike, any comments on that?
Yeah, I would say write down these two words, intent and already. So intent, you want to really think about the intent behind that particular search query. What do you think that person is trying to achieve today? What is the answer they are seeking? What is the problem they are trying to solve? And the word already is a copywriting trick. It's a really, really useful word. When I say, who is your target market, you want to have the already in the next sentence that follows. People that have already decided that they need X, Y, Z. People that already know they need a solution for blank. That already, having that in there, suggests that they've done a bunch of the informational stuff and, as Brian said, credit card in hand. So yes, the types of search queries aren't going to be quite as explicit as they might be, say, for e-commerce. But if you can think of it in those terms, I think it'll greatly help you decide, is this a keyword that should be in my account yet? Or maybe I test that a bit later. I think there's not much intent behind that. Let's stick it on the list and we can try that later on. Let's go make some money first.
Good. There are other questions, but I'm working on them individually in the question box, so I think we're fine.
All right. So we've talked about this a lot already. I suspect that the vast majority of us on the call already understand this, but let's cover it so that we've got soup to nuts, as promised, in the keyword section. Negative keywords. How to stop your ads showing for particular terms. You may remember when I talked about parrots before, there was a line down at the bottom, the suggested ad group that Google gave us, which was parrot car, which I thought, I have no idea what that is, so I went looking for it. Turns out that Parrot make all of these kits, the Bluetooth stuff that goes in your car. We would not, if we sold pet parrots, we would not want our ad to show for any of these searches, for people searching for this stuff. So the way you're going to think about it is, what are some of the words that people would use to search for this stuff? So here's a little list. Any search query that I can think of that contained that, or one of those words, I wouldn't want to show that person an ad for my pet parrot stuff. I mean, installation of a pet parrot? Probably not, and definitely the other ones. Anybody searching for anything to do with car or Bluetooth, we don't want to show them an ad, so we add these as negative keywords. And negative keywords also have match types. So this is definitely a finer distinction that needs clearing up, because I see this mistake made all the time. We just inherited $1 million plus account in the last few weeks. It was being run by supposedly a reputable agency here in Australia who clearly had no idea about negative match types. So this is worth clearing up because they got it completely wrong. At the top here, we have a negative exact match keyword. So the minus sign denotes the negative, the square brackets denote the exact part. If we had this in our account, remember, exact match means that the keyword must exactly match the search query. So all this would stop would be people searching for the exact search query parrot car kit. If we had this negative exact keyword, it says to Google, do not show my ad if somebody types in exactly parrot car kit. But if that person types in parrot kit for my car, your ad would show, potentially. If they typed in car kit parrot electronics, your ad, would show. If they typed in parrot Bluetooth car kit, your ad could potentially show. So to stop your ad showing for that universe of search queries, what you want to do is to pick out the bit of that search query that makes it negative, if I'm explaining that well. So in this case, car, basically any search query that contains the word car, you don't want to show. So if you just use the word car as a broad match negative, then you're going to say to Google, broadly, match all of these search queries, and because of the minus sign, don't show my ad to all of the search queries that contain car. So you'd have broad match negative Bluetooth. Don't show my ad for all of these search queries that contain the word Bluetooth somewhere, anywhere in that search query. But a negative exact, just like an exact match keyword, is quite restrictive. And the same way we have a very small volume for our exact match keywords, an exact neg is only going to stop a very small number of search queries. So they're not particularly useful. There are certain instances where you're going to need them. I don't want to complicate, because again, we're thinking 80-20, we're thinking this model. There are outliers and there are particular use cases where this may not apply. I think for now, best that I don't go into that and confuse things. To illustrate the power of negatives, I just want to show you this very, very quick, simplified example, the math of negative keywords. Let's say we have a particular keyword. It can be an ad group, it can be a campaign, whatever, however you want to think about it. And we're getting, for that keyword or group of keywords, 20,000 impressions and 1,000 clicks. So we have a click-through rate, CTR, of 5%. But then we start digging through the data, and we find that actually our ads are showing impressions a whole bunch of times, maybe even half the time, when they shouldn't have shown. These were irrelevant, useless search queries to show our ads for. If we were to add some negative keywords, we might chop those impressions down to 10,000 instead of 20,000. I'm going to be generous here and say that some of those incorrect search queries, shall we say, did generate clicks. I'm not going to assume that none of them did, because people will click on stuff even when they shouldn't, and you'll see this in the data in your account. So I'm going to assume that instead of 1,000 clicks, we now get 900 clicks. What I mean by this is that for the stuff that we should have been showing ads for this 10,000, we're still going to get the same number of clicks on these 10,000. What we're doing here is not showing ads 10,000 times, and we're getting rid of 100 idiot clicks that should never have clicked on our ad. They should have figured out that this ad had nothing to do with what they did. They were searching for parrot car kit, and we were showing an ad for a pet parrot, but they still clicked on our ad anyway. There's always going to be a few idiot clicks. So let's assume there's 100 of those. We knock those out. Now the maths is much, much more in our favor. Now we have a 9% click-through rate because we're not showing ads to the wrong people. And we haven't talked about quality score yet, but I'm guessing that most of us on the call have an inkling that a almost double click-through rate is a good thing given the Google system, because Google, above all else, look at this number. And there's definitely a lot more to the quality score formula. We'll talk about that in week 5, and ways that you can boost quality score and what those other things are. But if you boil it all down, the number that matters most to Google is click-through rate, because it's an automated measure of how good the crowd believe your ad to be. If your ad has a 9% click-through rate and your competitor has a 5% click-through rate, all things being equal, Google assumes you are therefore a better advertiser, which means it needs to give you mates rates. We call it here in Australia. It needs to give you some kind of deal. The only deal it can give you, pretty much, is to charge you less. You can show your ad higher on the page too, but generally speaking, it's going to be a cheaper click because you are demonstrated that you're a better advertiser. You understand your market better. You are generating a better user experience for those people. Remember, right at the beginning, we talked about the 3 circles of who Google's trying to keep happy: the users, the advertisers, and Google shareholders. First and foremost, it cares about the user. They are definitely a user-centric company, and I know the cynics will disagree with me, but they are. Google says that an advertiser with a 9% click-through rate must be offering a better user experience than the advertiser with a 5% click-through rate. Therefore, and there's no other media in the world where this exists, the better you get, the cheaper it gets. You're a better advertiser, therefore I'm going to charge you less for those clicks than this guy over here with a 5% ad, and much less than this guy over here with the 1% ad. And that's why negatives are so important. If you can stop showing ads to the wrong people, and again, if you only use exact match keywords, this isn't really an issue. You don't need to worry too much about negatives at all at this point. But if you're going to use modified broad or even broader keywords, then you want a lot of negative keywords in your account to stop your ads showing to the wrong people. If you have a very low click-through rate and you've been running traffic for a while and you have broad match keywords, then this is a lay down misere for you. We're going to hit your 30% improvement promise instantly. If that's the case, if you go and look at your keyword tab in your account and you don't see any phrase match or exact match terms in there, remember double quotes and square brackets, if there's no punctuation anywhere, if it's all broad match keywords, then flick over to your dimensions tab, find the little scroll, the little drop down box, and go look for the one. I think it's called search terms these days, not search queries. Go look at the search term report in the dimensions tab, and you're going to find, it's going to scare you a bit, so have a stiff drink of whatever tickles your fancy first, but go have a look through that list and look at all of the random crap that you've been showing ads for, and you'll realize why your click-through rate is languishing. Trawl through that report, download it, stick it in Excel, print it out, sit down by the fire, whatever works for you. Trawl through that list with a highlighter or a big red pen and find all of these things that you should not be showing for, add them as negative keywords into your account. To do that, you go to the keyword tab, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a section called negative keywords. You add them to your account. Generally speaking, I'm going to say, well, do we go into that today? Probably not, but at the campaign level. That's all I'll say for now. I won't describe the nuances around that now because it's going to get confusing because I don't have slides for that bit. But job 1, identify what they are. We'll talk about how to add them in more detail in week 4, but if you've been running for a while, you probably already know. But go have a look at that. Don't make the assumption that Google is only showing ads to the right people. It's one of the easiest ways to improve any account that we take over. Here endeth the rant. Right. Grouping keywords. This is the last little section, and then we'll tidy up with a few questions. So they're called ad groups, not keyword groups, and that's a clue. Okay, a lot of people think of this in terms of, I've got to have these groups of keywords together, but they've sort of missed the point of this. They're called ad groups because the goal here is to show the right ad to the right person. And for the most part, we choose the page that we're going to direct people to at an ad level. Again, AdWords 301, you can overwrite that, and you can choose for individual keywords to send people to different pages. My suggestion is don't use it. Don't use keyword level URLs. And again, if that sentence was gobbledygook to you, don't worry, because you don't need to worry about it. That is a non-standard part of AdWords. But generally speaking, when we write an ad, we pick what's called a destination URL. I'll talk about those next week. And we send people to a page on our site. The goal is to send the right person to the right page on our site, having seen the best ad for them, so that we are delivering what they searched for. So I like to think of ad groups when I'm teaching this as buckets. You think about all of those keywords that you've gone and done research for. Again, don't care if it's on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet. What you now want to do is to group those together into similar themes. So think back to, well, let's use this example. Think back to the original example we looked at when we were using the Google Keyword tool. These were two of the groups that it suggested. There's lots of different ways to do this. Parrot cage covers, used parrot cages, parrot travel cage. Clearly, they're all cage keywords, and for now, they can all go in the one bucket, the one ad group. The reason being is we want to show these people an ad all about cages, and we want to take them to the cage section of our parrot website. If we decide we want to show ads, this is again a bit more of an informational term, and everything I've said so far we wouldn't do this, but if you chose that you wanted to show ads to people searching for these type keywords, types of parrot types, etc., then that's a whole another group of keywords. It's a different ad group, and this list of similar keywords goes into a different ad group. One of the biggest mistakes I see with AdWords still is people lump all of these keywords, there might be 500, into one ad group. And so you've got, I don't know, stuff like parrot cage and green parrot and parrot food and parrot DVDs and all of these random different things all lumped into the one ad group. The problem with that is you have to show the same ad to all of those people, and that isn't going to work very well for you. The trick, the rule of thumb here to think about is, can I fit all of the words that are in my little group here, can I fit all of those words into an ad? With our little list of words here on the left-hand side of the screen, it's pretty easy. Maybe not the word cover or the word travel, but it's pretty easy to get the word parrot and the word cage into our ad. Anybody searching for any of these is going to see an ad about parrot cage. If I lumped all 7 keywords on the screen into the one ad group, it gets much harder to write an ad that talks about types of parrot and parrot cages. I have to have a very general ad that says, we do everything parrots, we've got cages, we've got this, and that isn't as relevant to the person searching. So by breaking your big keyword list into groups of similar themes, and this is one of the hardest things to get, but when you get it, it's really, really obvious, and you can't understand how anybody didn't get it. But when you don't get this, it's really frustrating, and it's one of the hardest things to teach because it's different for every single person. Everybody has a completely different keyword list. So forgive the parrot example. I'm hoping this is getting clearer for you. Small groups of similar keywords so that we can show an ad that is highly relevant, i.e. going to get clicks, i.e. going to be cheaper for those people, and then we can take them to the best page on our site. Any questions about that to cover up, Brian, before I move on to different options as we start to think about building out campaigns?
Yeah, there are a few about the keywords and the match types and so on. So David asks, should I be removing all variants that are capitalized and pluralized, and should I stop blocking misspelled variants?
Don't worry about capitals. Generally speaking, we have all of our keywords all lowercase all the time. It doesn't make a difference. So just for the sake of neatness and to make sure you don't end up accidentally having the same keyword twice, don't worry about capitals. It's entirely up to you, really, how much digging you go into. The misspellings are often as profitable as the normal spelling. So you certainly don't want to make the assumption that you should remove all misspelled keywords. If you have the data to back that up, if you found from a search query report that this particular misspelling consistently brings in crappy traffic, i.e. lots of impressions, lots of clicks that you're paying for, and no conversions, then by all means start to use negative keywords. But you certainly don't need to add those at the beginning. So again, sort of think more in terms of those discovery terms. Let Google do the work. We're all making some assumptions at the beginning of an account. We're saying to Google, go show this. We think we've honed it down pretty well. You go show these ads to the people that we're identifying, and then we will use the data to improve things as we go.
Okay, good. Next question from Matthew. He says, for example, what would be the savings I get if I bump my click-through rate from 1% up to 9%? What kind of
Substantial.
right? Like, would it be a 9x drop in cost per click, or?
Probably not. It used to be that simple. It used to be that sort of double your click-through rate, halve your cost. The
Right.
formula is much more complicated than that these days, and it depends greatly on your competition and where they're at. Because if you've moved from 1 to 9, but all of your competitors are averaging 20, then it's not going to be near as substantial a discount. If you've moved from 1 to 9, but all your competitors are around about a 3, then Google's going to love you, and the discount is going to be higher. So impossible to answer, but a good thing to shoot for.
Good. Next question from Joseph. If you have a much better click-through rate in some campaigns than others, does Google judge you by campaign or the whole account? Should I pause the low click-through rate campaigns if I exhausted my improvements because they drag down others?
Well, we'll talk about quality score in week 5, and
Okay.
we'll go into that in much more detail because that requires a more detailed answer. There is no short answer for that, sorry.
Okay. That's fine. Joseph, watch for week 5, and we'll explain that in greater detail. So a question from Robert. I'm going to try answering Robert's question. Good to have you on, Robert. I have one product and only one. This means that it makes it all the much easier, and I don't need a big ad group, right? And Robert, my answer for you is yes. Well, okay. It is correct that you sell only one product. Knowing you and your business as I do, but there are lots and lots of different possible search queries that people might type in order to find you. It might be wedding DJs, it might be wedding entertainment, it might be wedding MC, reception MC, and so on. And every one of those different terms will require different ads. And so therefore, they'll require different sets of keywords in different ad groups. So you'll have a wedding MC ad group where all the ads are about wedding MCs. You'll have a reception entertainment ad group where all the ads are about entertainment at your reception, and so on. I hope that makes sense. But actually, even if you just have one product, the art of doing AdWords still says that you're going to want a lot of different ad groups with a lot of different kinds of keywords in them. Anything you want to add to that, Mike?
No, excellent answer. It's about, again, coming back to them. It's about the people, and it's about entering the conversation going on in their head, which really is about using their language. The more you can use their language, the more relevant you appear to them. So to use your example, if someone is searching for DJ, but you talk about MC, or vice versa, you're not as relevant as the person that uses the same language.
Yep.
And so as much as possible, the way you do enter that conversation already going on in their head is to use their words. I mean, I suppose it's akin to NLP, and matching and mirroring, and what we were taught to do in school when going to our first job interview. If they talk fast, you talk fast. If they sit back, you sit back. All of that stuff. It's the word equivalent to that. The more you can match where they're at, you appear more relevant to them. They are drawn to you because you're the one that gets me. You understand me. You're the one that's going to have the answer to my problem.
Yeah. This guy Robert knows exactly what I'm looking for. That's what you want him to. That's what you want him to think. The split second they see your ad. So yeah, that's the art of doing AdWords. As for finding the search queries that have been done in my account, Mike, I know you're going to talk about that. Will that be today, or will that be on a different webinar where you talk about seeing the actual search terms that people have typed in?
Yes, I've covered that very, very briefly today. I will talk about that a lot more, a little bit week 4, more in week 8, where we talk about ongoing management. So all of this foundational stuff, and we'll talk about keywords today, ads next week, and then in Week 4, we're going to talk about building out your campaigns. I'm just going to give it a little bit of sort of preparation for that now. All of this is to get to that point where you can start to run, or where you're rebuilding what you are already running. A lot of the art, to use the term that you've just been using, a lot of the art of AdWords is how you manage it on an ongoing basis. And this is where we as small businesses, be that if we're running this for our own business or running it for clients, whatever, we have a huge advantage over those big business that just don't get this, and they treat this the same way they treat their TV or their yellow pages or their press ads, which is come up with the idea once and then set and forget, and then we'll replace that in 6 months with a different idea and hope that we can knock a few more people over the head and get them to buy. It's the ongoing management is what makes the difference. So digging through the data will be covered in a lot more detail in week 8.
Perfect. More questions, but I'm gonna tackle them
okay.
Individually here.
Okay. So this is the last little section. We will talk about building out your campaigns and your ad groups in week 4. I just wanted to highlight 3 options that you have, because I know we're going to have a whole bunch of overachievers that are going to blast away and go fill out spreadsheets with all of this stuff. It's fine for now just to build a big long list. Remember, a big list of good, a big list of bad. That's good enough for now. I'm going to give you 3 options. The basic one is to have all of the keywords in an ad group be the same match type. So again, this comes down to your appetite for risk and how aggressive or conservative you want to be. We've talked about finding the keywords, grouping them into similar buckets, and then the different match types that you might choose to use. That might be all modified broad, which I'll call mod broad most of the time, or all phrase, maybe even all exact. So the basic setup is to have that bucket, that ad group, have all of those keywords be the same match type. For example, this is the one we had before. Everything might be, well, in this example, there's no punctuation, so this is all broad match, which I've said don't use, but it's a simplified example, so you get the idea. Another option, a slightly more effort to manage, but a more granular way to build out your account, which gives you more control. And this is generally speaking how we build out most ad groups that we build for clients, is to have only one keyword in each ad group. But because to make our life easy, well, okay, actually I'll cover this distinction in a second. One keyword in each ad group with all 3 match types: modified broad, phrase, and exact. The distinction here, you only need the 3 match types if you are going to bid differently for those match types. So we will generally bid exact match higher than phrase, and we'll bid phrase higher than modified broad. So for example, it might be $1, $1.20, and $1.50. Those are not exact numbers, just an example. If you don't want to bid them differently, then you only need to add the broadest match type. So for example, if I was going to have all 3 match types here, then you could get away with just adding modified broad plus parrot plus cage, because that will still match to anything with the phrase parrot cage in and the exact search term parrot cage. From a reporting point of view, it's very easy to pull that data apart and look at essentially different lines of data for what happened when I matched, this is getting complicated, I know, but what happened when I exactly matched the search query? What happened when it matched as a phrase? What happened when it matched broadly? If all of that was gobbledygook to you, then just stick with one match type. The only reason you need 3 is if you're going to bid those differently. And then the last one is the complicated one. And I'm going to suggest that even though Francesco, and g'day to you, Francesco in Italy, he's already asked a question about this on the Google Plus community because he does it this way. And this is where you have one keyword with only one match type in each ad group. So my parrot cage exact ad group only has the exact match parrot cage. My parrot cage phrase group has the phrase match of parrot cage, But in order to stop the exact parrot cage search queries appearing in this ad group, I have to do this thing called sculpting. I have to say in this ad group, and I know we're on to Adwords 301 now, so if your brain's already melting, don't worry, you can just ignore the next 3 minutes. I have to say to Google, if it's an exact match, don't put it in here. So a negative exact match parrot cage, that forces all of the exact matches up to my top ad group. And then just to complete the picture, at the bottom, I have my parrot cage broad ad group. I have a broad or modified broad keyword with the negative phrase of parrot cage. So that's going to say, okay, if I've got a search query that includes parrot cage, where do I buy a parrot cage? Push that into the phrase match ad group. If it matches something broader, I need a cage for a purple parrot, then that's going to get pushed into the bottom ad group. This is, as you can see already, overly complicated. I think it adds significant extra management load to your account. And the biggest reason I'm going to suggest that you don't do this is because nobody has ever been able to give me a sensible answer to this next question. What ad are you going to show that's different to these three groups of people? They're all searching for some kind of parrot cage. How is the ad copy going to be different? Because remember, it's called ad groups, not keyword groups. If the ad is going to be the same, if the destination URL is going to be the same, then you may as well just do the one we showed just now and put all of these into the one ad group. And if you're not going to bid differently for exact, phrase, and broad, then you don't need all of the match types. You only need the broadest one that you're comfortable with. So that might be modified broad. If you're a bit more conservative, you might only need the phrase match, and that'll take care of exact match as well. And then if you're really conservative, you're only going to have exact match. But I don't believe that anybody on the call needs to use this setup. It's unwieldy, it's complicated. It's okay to set it up, but the management of it over time becomes really quite onerous. You really don't want to go there. And again, just to hammer this point, whatever it is that you start with, it is just that. It's just a starting point. The magic comes when we dig through that search query report, that dimensions tab that I showed briefly and that we'll talk more about in week 8. The art, as Brian has said, of doing this is how you make changes over time based on data, not based on subjectivity or gut feel. So, action steps. I'm going to finish every single one of these weeks with some action steps for you to go off and do, because remember Tim's DIS formula, the last one is stakes. You learn far, far more by rolling up your sleeves, getting in there and doing. Even if that costs you a bit of money, think of it as tuition. You will learn far more by spending, investing a few $100, $1,000, whatever, over the course of the next 8 weeks, even if you get some of it wrong, because you ain't going to get it perfect. It's your first go. But far better to go invest that money in the market, put it down as tuition cost. You'll learn far more by doing. So, go do some research on your market. Go talk to some people. Go look at Amazon and see what exists there. Deeply, deeply, deeply understand your customer. Climb into their heads. Understand their pains and frustrations and the problems that they're trying to solve, all of which will greatly inform the work that we do next week when we come to write ad copy to go with these keywords. But the keywords have to come first. For now, use the Google Keyword Planner. You don't need any paid tools. You don't need any of those other tools that I mentioned, although some of them are quite interesting to go look at. But if you just want to start simple, Google Keyword Planner is good enough for now. Figure out what, broadly speaking, what themes your products or services break down into. And looking at your website is probably the easiest, clearest, fastest way to do that. And then start to build out, again, however you do that, piece of paper, Excel, Google Doc, whatever, start to build out a bit of a list. If you want to start grouping those together into similar buckets, fantastic. That'll make life easier when we get to week 4. But start at least to make a list of those starting keywords, and for bonus points on the other side of the piece of paper in a different column in your spreadsheet, a list of what you think some negative keywords might be. We don't need to add those to an account yet. If you're already running accounts, great. Ask me in the Google community if you really want to know how to do that and you can't wait. But we'll get to all of how to build all of these things. Again, my job is to break this down into the Lego pieces, figure out what the 80/20 is and what order to put these in so it makes the most sense for you, then putting all of this together, and off we go. And the more advanced stuff will come weeks 5 to 8. Next week, we will talk about ad copy, a little bit of Swiss Army knife, a little bit of psychological triggers, and Joe Sugarman's stuff that I said I would share with you. I'm going to give you my mind map of Sugarman's triggers, because that is a very hard to get book. Out of print with some fabulous stuff in it, so you'll get my summary of that. And I've actually mind mapped Swiss Army knife too, which I did many years ago after the Maui event. So since you get Swiss Army knife as a bonus for buying that, I presume I'm okay to give away my mind map of the Swiss Army knife as a yet another free unadvertised bonus, which is, there's got to be one every week, I reckon. Questions?
Yes. Let's see. Most of them I feel like I've been able to answer adequately. Do you mind just taking 20 seconds and restating the action steps
Yes.
for everyone?
Go play. Go do some research. Use the Google Keyword Tool. You'll find it inside your AdWords account under the Tools section. Start to make a list of keywords. Check your website to see which groups of keywords you might need to go research. We've got a client, for instance, that sells doors, windows, awnings, and shutters. So I could be going back around the keyword planner at least 4 times. They're 4 quite different themes. That's how his website is ordered for really quite different things that he does. So you keep going back around, back around, back around. It's an iterative process, and you start to build a list. How long that list is entirely up to you. I'm going to suggest, I think I said 10 to 250, so at least half a dozen as a starting point. If you want to get bonus points, go knock yourself out, go for 100 or even 200. But you don't need to have thousands and thousands of thousands on there, because we're going to let Google do the heavy lifting for us. We're going to start in the bullseye, maybe the first 2 or 3 rings on our archery target. We're going to say, let's start there. This is what's most likely to be profitable. Google, over to you. Give me lots of data, and I'll use that data to improve my results. We are not aiming for perfection. We are not aiming even necessarily for profit on day one. There is a certain amount of paying the market to learn. As long as we use that data, as long as we learn, as long as we make changes, then we'll keep improving the profitability of our accounts over time. That's, as you've already mentioned, the art, and a lot more of that in week 8.
Very good. And we're continually keeping an eye on people sending in requests for the Google Plus community. So if you haven't submitted a request, be sure you do so. If you have and you're waiting for us to accept you,
I'm approving those within minutes. I'm in there multiple times a day, so there's nobody that has, unless it's been in the last 2 hours, there's nobody that's asked to get in that isn't in.
Okay, good. So Mike will approve you if you haven't gone and sent the request in yet. So lots of questions. If you asked a question that you felt I didn't adequately answer via chat, or Mike didn't adequately answer quite yet verbally, then take advantage of the Google Plus community, and we'll try to help you out. So a lot of fundamentals here, and these really are fundamental, because if you're still in AdWords 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, you will still be using these principles again and again and again and again, and they won't get old. The details and the features and the functions will change bit by bit, but the basic principles of keywords and matching ads to what people are asking for, that will never, ever, ever change. So good stuff to know now. Mike, anything else before we call it a day?
No, I am done. I'm going to go get a drink of water.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll see you in the Google community. Bye now.
Thank you. See you next week.